You are listening to Wicked Psychotherapists, a podcast where two psychotherapists show you that taking care of and learning about mental health doesn't have to be wicked hard.
Hey everyone, this is Tanya.
Hi, this is Erin, and welcome to Wicked Psychotherapists.
Our topic today, which is Mr. Fred Rogers, the show. We wanted to dedicate a show to him, an episode to him, because we both are big fans. We're big fans as little Erin and little Tanya. We enjoyed him, and, we really wanted to highlight him as a champion for children's voices, advocating for, their educational, emotional, and points of view, I think, in this world, and how to navigate scary topics, how to navigate things just as a child and not knowing what to do with big emotions or small emotions, which are themes that are now pretty common nowadays. But he was a trailblazer in his own time, for sure. He really was a huge part of that movement, and he was so compassionate and so, I think, quiet in the way that he did that. And I just really admire him. I've always admired him. I've always found him to be a comfort. I hid that, as I've mentioned. I'll talk about that more, why I hid my admiration for him. But I thought we'd kind of get into it by, starting to talk about, like, what's been your experience with Mr. Rogers? Like, as a child, maybe, as you grew up, how did you experience his show, his influence?
I was trying to think of what I feel like the show was on. Was it on like twice a day? Like maybe I feel like it was like morning. Maybe they did show it twice, like maybe in the morning and then when you got home from school.
I think it depends on what network.
Because I remember,
I don't know, honestly.
Because I remember as a child always watching it in the morning, and then when in grade school or, wherever, watch it in the afternoon too. But so maybe it was on twice. But I do remember just being completely immersed in it, like when it was on, just not really worrying about the noise of, whatever else is happening, because it's the way he just kind of knew how to draw you in for that half hour or however long it was. It just felt like you were part of it. You're part of the field trips that he's going on. You're part of, what the whole set looks like. You memorize like the little stop sign thing at the front of the room. You know where the fish tank is. You know where trolley is going to be. You know what? Oh, wait, now it's time he's going to go to, the make-believe place because he's putting a trolley on the tracks. It's exciting, and it's also familiar too. So, and that also was very calming for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he certainly was someone, I think, that could be, as, we both have talked about, we didn't come from the most stable households. And I think being able to have an influence in your life, even if it's on television, where you could watch at whatever points we watched. I think I remember it in the morning. I don't know, maybe it changed, but whatever points we knew it was on, we knew what we were getting. We knew the routine of it, and that is stabilizing. And it's calming when it's someone that feels safe. And I think that's really what I remember, just feeling so safe with him and hiding that from everyone around me, because my family members kind of, I think, found him to be a little bit maybe like childish or kind of not their style. I think some words like, I hate even saying this because it hurts my heart, like corny, were used for him. But I loved him. I instantly connected. And I remember just feeling like he is a kindred spirit. Like, I get this. Like, I didn't feel understood as a child, as probably a lot of us didn't. And I felt like, oh my gosh, he sees these emotions, these things that I can't express, that they're there. And he would walk in with his cardigan, and which is why I'm wearing one today. And it's very much in how I think of Mr. Rogers. And he just was absolutely a beacon of stability and calm for me. I think this is probably the way a lot of kids who, even if they didn't have dysfunctional families, maybe just felt around him. They just felt validated in their perspective, you know. But for me, it was like, in the chaos of my home, that was like, oh my gosh, there's somebody who exists out there.
Yeah, you're being
seen. I thought maybe it was made up. But yeah, but I really just was like, oh, it's there. Something's there. But it was really, truly just so validating, so connecting for me. That is part of the many things that he brings, right? He really he brought not just a generation of children, these validating feelings, these ways to express your emotions, making it okay to say, hey, I'm scared about this. And what does this mean? And rather than, shielding kids from this, and making it even more of a scary monster with big topics, he would sit down and thoughtfully explain on their level.
Right.
And it just was like, and it wasn't just for one generation. You said he was on since the 60s, until 2000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of generations of kids.
Yeah. I know when I was watching the documentary that they talked about like I don't know if it was one of the first episodes. I don't know when he started, but he ended up talking about Robert Kennedy's assassination. And, so they explained like they had one of the puppets. They like talk, I don't know if it was Daniel Tiger, talk about what is assassination and talking. And it was just it was an open conversation because it was probably really scary because I'm sure their parents probably had the news on 24 hours, like they were probably like nonstop watching the news. And it was probably really scary for these children to view. And, and here they go to Mr. Rogers for their safety and for the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Which reminds me of one of his quotes that I know is like kind of passed around a lot these days, but I so lean on that when it's, I guess it's I'm going to butcher this, but it's something along the lines of, my mother always told me when things get scary to look for the helpers. There's always a helper, and it just kind of is like, it's that feeling of, I always connected with that, and saying like, oh, maybe I could be that for someone else because I understand that other side of it. And I think in his own life, that's why he became the person he became.
Yeah.
Because as we were talking about, he was very much
bullied.
He was very bullied and called some awful names and, teased for his weight and didn't really seem to have many friends. And he kind of would play piano a lot, spend time with his grandfather, you said.
He
was actually,
No, I was going to say, and he played with puppets and stuffed animals, and he just created his own little world.
His own make-believe. Make-believe, right? And that's where his, empathy, his compassion, and his creativity really came in to recognize, hey, if kids had this, this is something I know could be valuable for kids that do feel this way and that don't have this validating force and need this.
Right.
So he really had a very strong drive for that. And it showed. Absolutely. He was, I think, down to his basing characters in his real life in the land of make-believe on the puppets and everything. Like he based some of the characters, like Mr. McFeely, the postman, was based after his grandfather, and some of the puppets were like, even like Daniel the Tiger was based on his very shy, quiet side.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was so interesting, like parts therapy, like internal family
even
systems.
Before it was even really talked about. So, and it's interesting too, because he would use Daniel Tiger, be like, I'm scared, I'm shy, or I need a hug. And, because he's like, okay, because Daniel Tiger was very shy, but he kind of knew what he wanted and he was able to express it. And so Mr. Roger was probably having that voice of little him and knowing that maybe there's a child out there that was really shy. I didn't know how to voice or didn't know what to say or didn't have a way to feel safe, ask him for a hug or saying, I'm scared.
Yeah. And it was, so, it's so, because that character so appeals to, it definitely would have appealed to me, but it was odd. The voice really actually kind of, I didn't respond to it, I guess I'm going to say. Because it would kind of be like very high pitched and he would be kind of curled into him. And I probably didn't like it because that's probably how I was. You know what I mean? And I didn't like that about myself.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so it resonated with you and it probably felt too familiar and was probably a little aggravating. Like, wait a minute, why do I notice this? Or what is this? What about Daniel Tiger? It seems.
Yeah. I didn't really like it to be pointed out, I guess, but I think of course I probably related to him. I just was not wanting to admit. It's so interesting because he created this show where there's so many elements to it. There's groundbreaking elements where he discussed big topics. He engaged in things where he was discussing big issues of the time, like racism, nuclear war, assassinations, big things that might be scary for kids to understand what's going on in the world. And he really gave a voice to it and was very revolutionary in a lot of things that he put forth on his show.
Yeah, he's very big on helping the kids understand acceptance too, even having children with disabilities on as guests. And so then other kids watching it can also see and be exposed to maybe someone that looks like them or maybe someone that looks different than them, which is so wonderful that he did that.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because when you said that, I flashed back to this particular episode, or I don't know if I saw it was like on YouTube or something and it was replaying recently maybe. So maybe I'm having a recent memory, but I do remember that episode where he had invited a child on who I believe I'm not quite sure what, kind of disability it was. It doesn't matter, but I know she was in a wheelchair and he was in a wheelchair, and he, just the way Mr. Rogers talked to him, it just, because, as a child, I just kind of didn't know, like I didn't have much experience with, like I don't think I had any kids who were like in a wheelchair or had like kind of a disability that was very visible in that way at that point. And I do remember thinking like, wow, this is such a nice interaction. And he's just talking to this boy and they're just having fun. And it so worked on me, it so was like, oh, this is so relatable. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, okay. It like really clicked with me. And the way he talked to children, I'm sure that resonated with so many people.
Yeah.
I was just so amazed by that, because I was like, wow, like it seemed like to me there was something that was not like maybe a barrier in conversation. I mean, I had my own barriers in conversation, but like, I mean, in general, and just knowing people, that I may have been like kind of maybe shied away from that because I didn't know what to say. But the way he approached it was just so personable. Yeah. And he got down on like, he always got down on the child's level, always. Yeah. Like he was always very like, talking to them. And I just loved that. Yeah. It was just so wonderful.
Yeah. And there's something to that too, by actually kneeling down or sitting in a chair so you're level with, instead of being this big, huge, towering adult. So often, like adults don't realize that. It's like, it's very intimidating to have this big person like talking to you or yelling at you, or
for sure.
And you have this very calm person getting down and singing a song with you or looking at you in eye contact. It feels different.
Yeah, which is huge. It reminds me of, because I used to work exclusively with children at one point in community mental health. And I'm going to shout out my supervisor, Alice. I don't know if she listens to this. She's amazing. Like she is like a Mr. Rogers Jr. Like she just is like in her own right. She also wrote a book. I'm just saying, like, she's amazing. And
shout out to Alice.
Yeah, she's a really amazingly talented, cool, nice, just intelligent, wonderful person, never mind therapist. But she really taught me so much about children and about getting down on their level. And she would always reference Mr. Rogers. And I was always like, I would be like, I love Mr. Rogers too, but I don't think I'd ever made those connections that like, oh, we brought this into psychology and into like children's mental health. Yeah. And the way she would, kind of teach me those lessons, it taught me how much of an influence Mr. Rogers really was on understanding children and getting down on their level.
Yeah. And we talked about this before we started recording, just even how he studied child development, and he followed like some really big name people in child development and psychologists while he was planning the show. And just like, how many people do that? Not very many, like just to be like, okay, I want to make sure I'm really understanding and I want to get schooled. And it's just really humbling.
It really is. That's a great way to put it. It really is. I mean, and especially coming from the generation like he came from, I don't think that was very prevalent. He probably came from a more, and I'm not completely positive, but maybe more of a like children should be seen and not heard kind of generation. He was also an ordained Presbyterian minister. And I am very ignorant in the fields of that and understanding that. But just the fact that he kind of had a more like conservative-ish background, upbringing, but the way he was able to see that, and probably likely in his own childhood and to see what was needed. He developed this empathy, this understanding, this compassion. He had kind of all those key elements and the intelligence to really kind of say, hey, this is what's needed. This is what's needed to be shown for kids. And, let's do this better. He was a huge advocate for children's public television because he wanted to make quality programming. As you pointed out, and you said this, he was not a big fan of television at all, but he wanted to use a platform like television. He recognized the importance of the platform and how it could be quality and good. And man, did he make good on that promise. I mean, he really, and he advocated in Congress and got like a huge grant for PBS to do this and kept it running until 2000. Apparently.
I mean, and how unheard of too, because it seems very backwards, doesn't it? Because most people say, okay, well, I want to become an actor, an actress, or I want to produce, or I want to do this because I love TV and I want to be part of it and I want the spotlight.
Yeah.
Where Mr. Rogers was like, I want to help children and I love people and I don't love what TV is doing to people or what people are being exposed to, especially the children. There's no children television. At that time, I don't know what was on TV in the late or middle 60s, when he started. It's, we always...
you said Howdy Doody.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my mom talking about Howdy Doody and Clarabelle the clown or whatever, whoever it was. I think, I don't know who...
Sounds terrifying.
Yeah, or I don't know who it was. And I remember my mom talking that she was so excited because she loved the show. And it was horrible. Like, she said it was so mean. Like, they were so...
Really?
Yeah, I guess they were not very kind to the kids in the audience, and they pulled her up and she was so excited to meet Clarabelle and Howdy Doody, and they just made her feel really bad. And she just remembered she felt that feeling, and it was just really embarrassing and just really... I can't remember what they did, but I just remember she felt really shame, and which is really sad.
They definitely weren't validating to kids.
Yeah, which is sad because you picture like this little 7 or 8 or however old she was, year old, just all excited. But oh my gosh, I got to meet this, I'm going to be, meet this people. Cause they had, I think before that, it was like always the Mickey Mouse Club and stuff. So they had some of that, but
yeah.
And for Mr. Rogers to say, you know what, I want something different. I want to have the kids to be exposed to something different. So he probably either saw that or didn't see it and just realized that something else had to be for the kids of the next generation. I know one thing he always said, and I think in some of his songs or something, it's just like, that everyone's special. And, and that everyone has unique qualities and things to contribute to, whether it's, whatever their trait, there are things that they might be good at or learn that they want to do. Which again, a lot of other television shows probably don't show that or encourage that.
Yeah, for sure. I think he was just such a, he was a trailblazer. He really was in that. I mean, to really come from all that, like you described, and just even from, that's just your mom's perspective, which is like horrific in and of itself. But imagine, like, there's probably a lot of kids who had that experience, and that's the way they were made to feel, and like their introduction to the world and like who you are as a person, you carry that with you. And he's saying, no, let's add value to that. Let's see that they have value and they have something to carry in this world and make this a more compassionate place. And some people may see that, and there's probably been others that said he's bringing up a generation of lazy, coddled students or something close to that, and butchering that quote. But, and I don't agree with that, because I think he was trying to say, everybody has value. I don't think he was trying to say, oh, everybody deserves a trophy at soccer. I think he was trying to say, some people are going to get trophies at soccer. But you know what? You could paint a picture maybe, or you can help that person, like everybody kind of has something they can offer. And what's wrong with that? Because everybody does have something they can offer.
Everybody does have a gift. So see, one person is great at soccer. One person could make the banner. One person can... Maybe they're really good at making snacks or cooking or cheering or, or just being a good friend. So everybody does have something to offer. And sometimes we're not able to see that as children.
Yeah, especially if it's not nurtured. And I think that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to spark that so that it can be kept and to have that nurtured so people could have that belief in themselves that I think so often he probably witnessed, he probably maybe felt, or maybe saw like other children losing that, or how easy it is to lose, if you don't have like the right supports or even just the right belief in yourself or the right, path, whatever it is. And in any sense of the word, you can definitely lose that.
Right.
And to me, that is, he was trying to empower people to say, hey, you have something to offer, run with it. Take it. He wasn't trying to say, you're special, just sit on that and do nothing. I don't agree with that.
Everyone will come to you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really don't see that at all. And I take offense to that. So no, I really don't, because he truly was a very important part of my life. I mean, he was really just someone that understands you, even if it was on TV, even if I felt like, oh, maybe it's kind of made up, maybe it's not, but it just kind of was like, oh, there was a little access point there, that I could have that I just didn't have anywhere else. And that can only imagine for how many other kids felt that way.
Yeah.
And honestly, I loved we need to talk about his cardigans. I mean, he had a stellar collection of just beautiful cardigans that his mother made all those cardigans. I love that. I think that's so cute. What talent too.
Yeah. And I know we were talking earlier too. It's funny that it's almost like people complain that he made a generation or whatever, all these people that are very soft or feel like they could be special. But I think what he really brought is he made generations of therapists and social workers wear cardigans all the time.
Yes.
And probably teachers too.
Yep. Educators and healers and, probably, like you said, like nurses and people who are like in caregiving roles that really see, okay, this value is in helping other people and also making sure I know I'm valued as well. Like how much of that is in our practice in therapy? Like it's every day that we say, hey, make sure you're valuing yourself, you're filling up your own cup, and then check on other people as well. And he really stressed that point in so many different ways.
And putting on the cardigan is almost like giving yourself a little hug too. So it's like taking care of yourself.
It is. That is why I think that's why maybe that's why therapists like it. Maybe that's why people like it. I always thought it's such a cozy little thing to like, you can kind of, hide in it, but you can also kind of wear it as like, I have this.
Yeah.
It's something safe.
You may feel a little more confident. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very versatile and it's comforting. And I think that it was just so symbolic for me when he would go into his closet. I was just like, how does he choose? I wonder like is it like based on his feelings? And I remember when I got older, I really I thought I want a collection of cardigans and I'm going to base it on my feelings. Like that's what I'm going to do. And so that's why this reminded me of like, it's soft and it's light, but it's also got a color that's very like neutral, comforting that I think really, I don't know, it just reminds me of Mr. Rogers.
Yeah. I feel like he tended to go towards the light brown and I feel like the yellow.
Yeah.
I saw saw the yellow and the orange a lot too. Like
the red.
Yeah.
He usually had that like the red kind of was how he was portrayed a lot in pictures. Probably just because it's a picture, but I mean, and I think that's probably why, therapists, we need kind of that comfort because we're dealing with a lot of stuff. We also want to feel comfortable and feel settled and take on other people's,
take off our uniform when we're done and leave it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Leave it there. Yeah. Because we have to. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably true for other professions and just people, who really identify with it. Right.
And maybe that's what part of his thing too is like, okay, I'm going to take off my dress shoes and put on, my Keds and put on my cardigan. And then switch back or whatever he did. But it probably was. So, all right. So I'm going to just leave it at the office or leave it at the studio.
Yeah, exactly. Like he could kind of go into different modes. It felt probably good for him. It felt like a good transition point, which again is something I talk a lot about with clients. And I always will recommend if people are having work-life balance issues, what's your ritual between, going from work? If you work from home, do you shut the door? Do you take off your cardigan? And I'll give them an example. I'll say I take off my cardigan if I'm wearing one. I shut the door. I make sure, everything is kind of closed and in a particular order because that makes me feel like it's done, and I think that's kind of what he was maybe saying about kind of this is how you can feel good in routines.
Yeah. And that is so important. That's something I talk about too, especially with people who are working from home. Because if you're driving to work, you do have that time to grab and get your coffee or listen to a podcast or call friends, or, you might have that half hour, an hour, or whatever your commute time is. But a lot of times when you're working from home, it's like, oh, I'm not even going to take a shower. I'm just going to go with my pajamas, or I might just have a coffee. But so I always talk to my clients, well, why don't you take your shower? Why don't you get ready? Why don't you go do something in between? So you're not just going straight to work. And same as in the backside too. What do you do at the end? How do you transition so you're not just closing the laptop and then be like, oh, hello, everybody, I'm off of work, instead of being like, let me give myself a little bit of a transition time or space. Do you walk around the house? Do you take a drive? Do you listen to a show or a podcast, or do something for a little bit to help your brain transition?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even think he talked about that. He demonstrated it.
Yeah.
And that was really something that I think stuck with a lot of people. And it was, for us, the stability felt really good. I loved trying to establish routines. Maybe that's where I got it from, but I loved that. I was like, that makes things feel contained and I don't have all this chaos around me. And the anxiety can be contained.
One thing I really liked when I was reading about him and watching the documentary and stuff is they said that he was very purposeful about being slow and leaving blank spaces of silence, which is so interesting because in shows today, it's like fill every spot, make a little zap in there and have clapping and everything has to be bright, or we have to do all this stuff. And especially for kids, they feel like, okay, it needs to be a lot of stuff. It could be really overwhelming.
Needs to be filled with something.
It can be very overwhelming. And he's very purposeful. Like maybe he'll have a turtle on the ground and let's just watch it walk. Or he's going to change the light bulb on the stoplight thing he has in the front of his little room. We're going to watch it. We're just going to sit there.
Yeah. I love that. It's like mindfulness. He was teaching mindfulness, like be present in the moment. And he was also teaching, again, those are very important tenets in therapy, like the purposeful pause, the silence, using silence as that can be, a way of listening to see what is the client really wanting to fill that space with. Are they overly, anxious in the silence? And why is that? And that's a huge tool in therapy.
Yeah.
And I know we're drawing conclusions that we're not saying like it was a direct maybe bridge there, but it certainly is some great lessons that translate.
I'm learning about Mr. Rogers. It does sound like a lot of his things, it wasn't a lot of happenstance. Like he seemed like everything was very purposeful and well thought out. He was a very intelligent person. And I do feel like he was, okay, well, how can I reach the child this way? How can I really let them see and hear? Or if they might have questions, maybe they're asking it out loud. So they'll have time to just really understand what's happening through the pauses.
Absolutely considered the child's point of view. And that is it's just so different from that world of where you're, when you said your mom felt shamed and just kind of bad, right? It was very much taking into consideration how would they feel, how would they process it as a child and a child brain. And, from their point of view, just still learning about the world. They're not small adults, they're children.
Yeah. And sometimes we forget, especially like you'll see like different ages and people forget like, oh, well, they should know this or they should do this or blah, blah, blah. It's okay for them to watch this, even though it might be an R or MA, or it's like they're children. They're very impressionable, and it's okay to have them watch children television. And it's even these days, there's so much that children are getting exposed to that not only shouldn't they, but their brains are not developed. And this is the time to nurture it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that with such a culture now of like, I don't know, childhood sometimes doesn't even exist with social media and how many things people can access and wanting to kind of say, oh, I'm more mature, or, I want to be doing this, I want to be doing that, because they're seeing other kids doing this. And they think it's kind of like childhood doesn't really, that kind of like innocence in childhood is not as present
Yeah.
at this point. And I think that's really what Mr. Rogers wanted
Yeah.
to preserve.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I hope we get to a point where it becomes normalized again, which, like you I've been seeing different things about how finally they're saying like, oh yeah, social media is not good for kids, or this is not good for kids. And that, which, most therapists and most people have probably known it. Going back to Mr. Rogers, he knew the things that children should be seen or should be exposed to at certain ages.
Yeah. He had a very good awareness of like child development in I think a very healthy, appropriate way. And knowing that, okay, they're going to hear about this nuclear war and what does that mean? And he did a whole series with that, like you
Yeah.
said, with Bobby Kennedy, the assassination, and, and even big events too, like, things that were kind of good, but were maybe, what is the meaning of this? Right. Like very positive things. Like, I think I'm not sure if I'm remembering this right, but I think he did when one of the like the Challenger, the
Oh, yeah.
spaceship,
I'm sure he
the
did.
rocket
Yeah.
exploded. I think he did something on that because a lot of school kids were actually watching that alive.
Yeah, he did.
Or
They
the
they
streaming
had
of
they
it.
had they showed like the rocket and stuff and like puppet rockets and stuff. And so I think he explained what happened. So because I remember I think I was in 6th grade when it happened and we all were watching. I think I was in science class and not even knowing what was happening because, and you were even younger. It was like it's very difficult to understand what's happening and why are all the teachers crying all of a sudden. It's really hard to understand. And yeah, so he knew, okay, well, gosh, we need to get to action and this needs to be our show tomorrow or whatever he did.
Yeah. And he, like you said, even after he stopped the show, they asked him to come out and speak about when 9/11 happened, which was, of course, huge and very confusing for everyone, but especially, kids and things like that. And he came and spoke on, was it a commercial or like a broadcast?
Yeah, he came in, they had him, he was like in a suit, so he wasn't in his usual cardigan and he just a PSA type of thing. And he just explained about, bad things happening and how scary it can be. And just in his calm voice and I think just probably seeing him on the television again, probably because the children that had seen him the year before when he retired would have still been probably the age to still watch him.
Yeah.
So it probably was very comforting seeing him.
For sure. Yeah. That definitely is, so huge to know that like this, national world event that happened and affected so many people and was just kind of the first of its kind, to that scale that they brought, they were thinking, well, Mr. Rogers is someone that can be the therapist. He can come in and he can comfort and he can guide them.
Yeah, he's the nation's therapist.
Yeah, he was for kids, and I think it was comforting for adults probably to see who had watched him. They probably felt something.
Yeah, I think I told you. My dad was such a big Mr. Rogers fan. And I don't know, like even like when we got to the age where we started, like middle school or high, whatever age you stop watching, probably middle school. And but I remember my dad would still have it on. Like he would watch it even when we got to an age where we're like, come on, Dad. It's not, but he'd be like, he would just watch it and he just loved it. He, by choice. So then we would sit and watch it. And I don't know if it was just for him because he had kids probably all of Mr. Rogers' career, so, and he might have been like,
comfort to him.
Yeah. And it might have maybe quieted my dad's mind because my dad is like, engineer and just probably very just so maybe watching someone who's so methodical was probably very nice and just like an old friend even.
Yeah, I think that definitely, because he became, he was spanned across, 4 decades, right? So that's a lot. And then he still endured in like the cultural kind of conversation. He was always kind of that reference of, for a while, I think some people kind of mocked it as like, oh, it's too emotional, it's too calm. But I think for people like us and many other people, he was calm and he was wonderful and he was compassionate. It's a good thing. It's very validating even to not only just to us personally, but in our professions and how people live their lives, how people choose to live their lives. And that's the thing I take away the most, that he validated and made it feel okay to be someone who has emotions and who, you don't have to hide those away. You don't have to not talk about it. You can. And
Yeah. And even in his make-believe land, or I always forget what it was called, like Land of Make-Believe,
yeah, I
but
think it was Land of Make Believe. I get it mixed up too.
everybody was so different. Like not everybody agreed with the king, or not everybody, listen, like Lady Elaine's craziness, but they still liked her, and they little kitty, meow, whatever. They're like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
let's talk to her. And then the wise owl, and just like everybody had a voice.
Yeah.
And even though it might have been completely opposite and didn't even make sense, they all listened to each other.
That's interesting. Yeah. They were very different, but they all got along, and they were all able to be kind to each other in the end, even though there may have been disagreements. And I think it's almost like conflict resolution shown with
Yeah.
puppets,
Yeah.
and wow, he really did, for a lot of like play therapy and just child psychology, and even in therapy for adults, a lot of the, acceptance therapy and being able to validate others and their feelings, express their feelings, role play, work things out. I mean, like the list goes on and on. How he could have, and I'm sure other people can say this about their professions as well. This is just what the angle we're looking at.
Yeah.
That's
And
pretty
then you
amazing.
wonder how many different fields probably use puppets or use some sort of thing to help children talk, or help even, what did you mean by that? Or why don't you
I used to use puppets in play therapy. I had finger puppets, and I had a little, what do you call it? Like a little kind of house where they could kind of go behind. And I would kind of do it at first to kind of show like, oh, I'm talking about this. And it wouldn't be anything about them at first. It would just kind of be like, I'm just telling you about myself, until they got familiar with it. And a lot of kids were for it. There were definitely a few that were like, I'm not for this, so we try something else. But they're in video games and stuff. I'm talking like, 2013, kind of thing and on. But yeah, they were not, either they knew it was me and they weren't buying it, or they just weren't into puppets. They were into video games, and they were like, puppets? That's nothing compared to the entertainment I can get from video games. But a lot of them did hook into it, especially the younger ones, like around 4 or 5. Those were,
Yeah, that was
they were
also
big into that.
a sweetness too. I saw like on the documentary, Mr. Rogers went somewhere to talk to a bunch of children, and he brought Daniel Tiger. And you can see Mr. Rogers talking, but they're just staring at Daniel Tiger, like, and then everybody comes in, like, Daniel Tiger's like, talking whatever he's saying. And then they just all stand in line to give Daniel Tiger a hug.
Oh,
they're all like
so
they all take turns, like, to give Mr. Rogers' hand puppet a hug. But it's just so
really cute.
It's so sweet. It's like, oh my God, it just such sweetness.
Yeah, he really was just a very compassionate, kind. I mean, revolutionary. He was just so many things wrapped in one. And the thing is, he just wanted those things to be for the betterment of the world, for kids, for people. And that's who he was, and that's the mark he left. And I am thankful and grateful.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I was gonna say grateful as well. It's pretty.
Yeah,
I'm pretty happy to have had. Yeah, I was gonna say to have my childhood, but I'm very grateful to have. I'm very grateful to have that.
Sorry, now we're just gonna have a laughing fit.
I'm grateful to have had the experience to have watched Mr. Rogers in my childhood.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think it definitely expanded my childhood.
Yeah, same for me. I really honestly think he set me on a path of not ignoring and shutting off these emotions that I think it was very necessary in the environment I grew up in. And he gave me a little ray of hope to say, keep those. That's a part of you. Like, you strongly, there's something that you have in there that you can connect with. I'm so thankful for that, because that really got me through so much. And it even guided me in my career. So yeah, it's a lot. And I really think he really was a huge influence when I really look back on it.
I don't think I realized how much of an influence he was until I was watching. I have to watch the Tom Hanks movie too. I haven't seen that one yet, but when I was watching the documentary, it just made me really realize just how much he affected me, as far like in a positive manner. And I don't know if I became a therapist because of him, but I think I became more empathetic. I had more empathy. I think I learned to look at things differently and embrace my imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He really encouraged so much. It really is. You can, even if you take one of those aspects with you, he made a huge difference. He really did. But yeah, so we are, I know we're kind of hitting up on our time here. I know we could go on for a while, but we really want to hear what you think about
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers. If, he had that impact for you, or if you have other feelings about it, whatever it is, we would love to hear about it.
Yeah. If you have any stories, if there's anything we missed, if you have a favorite cardigan that you wear,
Yes, please send pictures, description, whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable with.
if you
suggestions.
if you sport the blue Keds and a cardigan, like let us know.
Yes, that would be amazing. Yeah, I mean we'd probably have to show that if the person was okay with that on our next episode. But no, I'm just kidding. Whatever it is that you want to add, a few comments. And also just, apart from that, suggestions for future episodes. We always want to hear that. We love those
That would be
ideas.
fun.
Any comments from this episode or others are always welcome. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wicked Psychotherapists. And on Facebook, we are The Wicked Psychotherapists. Subscribe, follow wherever we're on all platforms, and write us a review if you can. That really helps. Please. We'd really appreciate it. Hopefully it is good. We would love that. If it's not, then maybe not. Maybe we can just, know that from afar.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or if there's some constructiveness to it, maybe send us a message and we'll.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Like, Erin, stop talking about your dog so much.
No, I don't think anybody would have an issue with that. I really don't. People love dogs, and Paige is adorable, so no. But yeah, so this is Mr. Rogers, and we will continue follow-up next week. But don't forget, stay wicked.
And keep your mind well.
Yes. Do that. And watch some Mr. Rogers if you can.
Definitely.
There's the movie, the documentary. Both are great.
And they have the shows, like if you have the PBS Kids app and you have kids and you want to introduce them to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And they have that Daniel Tiger cartoon show, which is, I guess, based on it. There's a lot of ways to have Mr. Rogers in your life.
For sure. But we love Mr. Rogers. But please, we are always for any opinions, anything, or just anything you want to add, or something that you think maybe we can talk about more in the future. We'd love
that
to.
Would be awesome.
So you all take care, and we will see you next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.